And we're back with another tutorial. This one is going to be expanding a little bit on one of the videos that you may have seen in the most recent version of the Deep Canyon or Deep Dive on the River Canyon tutorials. And actually in the intermezzo there was a scene somewhere in the middle that shows this landscape where we fly through it very slowly, and there is a snowstorm going on there. But it's a variety of snowflakes. There are some small ones up there, there's some big ones, a few down there. And there was a question on Facebook, on the Facebook group, to commenting on how to do that, or it's difficult to generate that. And the fact is, it's really a mix of several renders here. You see there's a lot of very heavy snowfall up here in the top area, and it's a bit difficult to see because of the glare, the fog that I added to that. So I wanted to kind of explain how I did that, because that's really several techniques put together here. And the first thing is, of course, to have rendered this animation. I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to load the AVI that I saved earlier, and there it is. That's the original. And as you remember, we can select the starting point and the end point of the animation. We don't need to load the whole AVI, and that's good to know if you have a very long video clip that you recorded on your smartphone or something, and you really want to select just a portion of it. Of course, it has to be in AVI format. But let's say we have a sequence here, and a portion of that, let's say 112 frames is what we want to grab. And of those 112 frames, maybe we want it actually a little bit slower, a little bit longer duration after all. So, we look at that and we'd say maybe we could use the motion interpolation. Let me also make it a little bit smaller, just for the sake of brevity and to make it a little bit faster. So I'm going to first resample this down to half the size. This one's 1280 squared, so I'm going to go 640. And that will free up a little bit of memory as well, and it will be easier to just manipulate and show how this works. The next thing I'll do as soon as this is done is I will store it so that I can get back to it quite easily. So animation, store to disk. I don't want to waste memory for that. So now we have a stored copy on the hard drive that I can easily, if I mess it up, if I delete it, if I do a few things, I try some filters and I'm not happy with it, let's say I lose it like this, and then just click here and that stored copy will come back into the active project. So that's the current animation we're working on. So now, how do we apply first of all, making this last a little bit longer, I'm going to go with the filter and animated and motion prediction module, and simply do a quick try run for 3 times as many frames. Default parameters probably fine. Let's just go and try that. No need for looking for scanned for dropped frames. Alright, so that's probably good enough. Let's just uncheck the dry run and go with that. So we will have 300 frames now, and a nicely smoothly interpolated, motion interpolated, or motion estimated interpolation. And so that's the one I really want to keep. Now the last frame is replicated to the first after the motion prediction module was applied. So I'm going to select that first frame here and delete it, and that's really what we will be working with. So let's go store that. Store animation to disk. It's a little bit longer, will take a little bit longer, but once we have it, it's a good one to go back to. Alright, so here we go. We have the animation. Now let's add some snowfall. Let's see. What do we do? Okay, we get the timeline, and in the timeline, what I'd like to do is apply the snowfall, but in several stages. So not just one, and a single application will not do that. If I render that just like that, it's going to be, well, a very quick and easy snowfall application, but that's not going to give me the snowstorm that I'm looking for. Right, like this. Okay, that's nice, but it's not what I'm looking for. So let's go and click undo. Make sure you have the save undo enabled here, so it actually even though it takes a little extra time, it will give you that ability to go back to it. Another option is to have it stored, and then you can just click here and that will restore it. Right? But what you do is you essentially work with these parameters here, the amount of snowfall, the size of the snowfall, small flakes, right, the flake size, the turbulence, how turbulent is it in its movement, and then there's two speeds. There's a velocity, which is a vertical speed, a vertical velocity going down. So if it's more like rain or heavy wet snow, you would want to have it at high speed. But if you want it to appear it's very light snow and mostly driven by the wind, not so much by gravity, you want the velocity to be almost non-present, and then the speed can go to the left or to the right. It's 0 in the middle, and the wind speed will have the snowflakes, cast to the right if indeed you go this way, and the snowflakes will move to the left if it's this way. So the trick is now to say, well, how do we render it so it looks like we have some heavy-duty blizzard, a lot of snowfall far away, and then just a few big flakes close, and then something in between that's kind of medium size and drifting a little bit, and kind of put the whole thing into a 3D appearance. And so one thing I'll do is I'll start with a heavy amount of snowfall, but small ones. So that's the size doesn't go up here; it goes down pretty small, like 2 or 3, something like that. And then so there's lots of it, and that's at a far distance, which means that it doesn't seem to be moving that fast, right? So I'm not going to have very high wind speed for that. I will probably give it some decent amount of movement, but not a whole lot, and the velocity all the way down to the minimum. It unfortunately doesn't do 0, it has to have at least 1. And also it doesn't do negative. If you want it to go upwards, you would need to flip the animation and then render and then flip it back. That would be great for bubbles rising from the ocean floor. But let's say here we want to have the snowflakes going softly to the side, very little turbulence, it's far away, too little turbulence that we can really detect. The size is small, and then the brightness also. You got to think about how important is it that you really see these snowflakes, or is it just kind of a blurry mush altogether? So you might want to bring down the intensity, not all the way down to black, but bring it down a little bit so it kind of blends into a grayish background. The sky that you see back there is kind of a gray tone, and so you may want to have it a little bit closer to that. All right, so let's do one application and see what happens. We can see here now that we have the snow going all across, and that's fine, but this really represents mostly the snowflakes we should see far away up there in this area of the picture, not so much down here in front of us. All right, so let's go and undo that, and what we'll do is we'll apply an alpha channel or a mask that will allow the filter to render in the upper area, but not so much in the lower area. And in fact, I'll do one that will come at the top all the way down to about where this ridge is. So it really fills the entire background scene, but not so much the front of the mountain scene. So the way to do that is with this tool here, but there's a couple of ways actually. You could use just the rectangular selection tool here, rectangle selection, and select something like this, and then don't keep it a very crisp edge, make it a selection fader, or blur. There it is, Gaussian blur alpha, do a little bit of blurry. Now you want to see the not the 50% demarcation line, but you want to see the actual coloring here, overlay alpha, so it gives you a little bit of a insights to how crisp that transition is. And so whatever appears pink when you are in this mode here, the overlay alpha, that's the portion that's not selected, and the portion that maintains its original coloring, that's the one that is selected. Now I'm going to use a different technique. Instead of just the rectangular and the blur, I'm going to use the right click on this tool here where the linear gradient is, and there's also a selection fader. All right, so I'm going to use that. Let me go and clear the alpha, and now I'm going to use the selection fader, where you can click from here and then drag down to see the selection fade away, and where you see the plaid pattern That's where it's not selected. Let me Control D to clear that selection again. If I wanted the selection to only be up here in the upper area, I could start from the outside or something like this and then drag down. It's a bit tricky here. The angle changes quickly which direction you're going here. So that's one technique to allow the snowflakes to appear just up there. Control D to clear. I'm going to do this one more time, but this time I'm going to allow all the way here, even into the mountain a little bit, and say something like this. Select this area. There. Now I'm rendering. All right, so let's apply that, and the snowflakes will only appear in the upper area. There they are. And I'm actually going to do that several times, and even with slightly different sizes. And really, you want the maximum number of snowfall here, and render it several times with that. 3-4 times. All right, so now do a quick playback. Okay, so we have the snowfall at the top. Now we need to start moving down. And what we can do is actually just open it up so it's still rendering at the top, but also rendering a little bit further down. Now you notice also that the mountain scene is kind of at a slant angle here. You might want to actually take advantage of that to draw your angle sideways. Control D to clear it first, and then say, okay, I'm going to allow the snowflakes 100% down in this area, but not just vertically, a little bit to the side, something like this. And so now we should see more of the snowflakes rendered all the way down to this area and a little bit into it as it fades out. So let's go and render one more time. In fact, probably just again 3-4 times additional. It renders additional material here at the top, but also starts rendering in the front here. Now I'm going to make the size a little bit bigger. I'm going to also add a little bit turbulence and increase the wind speed. That is critically important to make it look like it's closer to us. We want to make it look like it's moving faster. And maybe increase the brightness a little bit because it's now closer, we can see it better. Right? So all these things work together. We see it better, it's brighter. It's bigger because it's closer. And it shows more turbulence because it's close enough we can see it. The wind speed is bigger because it's closer, it moves past us a little bit faster. The velocity we don't need to worry about quite yet, and the amount of snowfall still good to have it at the max. Let's render that 1 or 2 more times, and you can see now it's starting to look really heavy up there. All right, let's play that. Okay, so now if we zoom in here, you can see already the benefit of having it done that way. You can see some small ones moving slowly, and you know, we might have done that even slower. It's moving a bit fast for my taste. We probably should do another render where it's moving slower, but the fast ones in front are the big ones. Those are the ones that really appear now to be close up. Up close. And so what I'll do next is change that mask one more time. Let's do and get the keyboard focus here, Control D to clear it, and this time I'll allow it all the way almost down to the bottom. All right, and I'll do one render with bigger turbulence, and I'm going to reduce the number of snowflakes a little bit here now, but I'm going to make them yet even brighter. I think I need to increase the size a little bit, more turbulence I said, and even faster, and now also increase a little bit the vertical speed. So I'm going to go down to 3 or 2 and render that. And then I'll do probably one final, and that one will be very few flakes, very big ones, full intensity, and also the turbulence and the wind speed. Actually, now the wind speed is going to be a different story. I'm going to increase the velocity a little bit, just tiny little bit, and the wind speed you might want to even, you know, you can try to, you can also have it maximum there, or you could say, well, actually, this is kind of maybe standing under an awning or under a rock or under a tree, and there is a little bit of turbulence, so suddenly now the wind of the local flakes is not going the same direction as the general movement of the blizzard in the background. So you could possibly reduce the wind speed again, you know, try one or the other way. One thing is really important is to have only few snowflakes though, because you might see that you're just doing too many of those. So let's see how that goes. And so now we can see some big ones going a little bit their own way here. And if that's too much, let's do an undo. If it's too many of them, and just reduce the number of flakes. let's make it a little bit more horizontal, a bit more turbulent, a bit bigger, and apply that. Okay, and then now finally I'll also do a render without any mask, right? So we have still this mask going here, Control D to clear the mask altogether, and that's going to be the one with just a few 10 snowflakes, the size pretty big, big turbulence, and now this one perhaps I'll make let's make no velocity and just render that as is, and see if that adds a little bit additional flair to that. So here you go. Now you have a mix of snowflakes at different sizes, speeds, directions, turbulent levels, and so on. It just adds to that. And if it's not too late to add a few more at the very top. If you feel like you need more on that blizzard, just go up here one more time with that selection fader tool. And in that selection fader, maybe a little bit further down. There you go. Make sure it's small size, little turbulence, wind speed, not too fast because it's far away, velocity, don't give any of those. Give it a lot of these flakes, bring it down a little bit on the brightness, and render that. And again, you can do this many times, 10 times, 20 times, until you have the right amount of blizzard or the right amount of coverage that you want there. And so I'm going to click this a few more times, and at that point, still there, still coming, and then at that point we'll have the rendering done, and we'll have a nice combination that shows how to put this all together into a snowfall bonanza, where basically there's snowflakes and snowfall happening in many different levels. Alright, so let's go and Control D this, and now if we zoom in here, we can see there's definitely a bit of a snowstorm bonanza and chaos going on here. That's the beauty of having done this render in a few different combinations. Down here there's only a few flakes, right? And then the more we move up, the more we see of that small snowfall activity, small flakes, lots of them, moving slower and adding to that perspective depth feeling. Now there's another thing I did in the final animation, and that is to add some fog, but not at the bottom. I wanted it at the top. It's kind of a glary appearance at the top here. Very cheap trick here. I'm going to simply flip the animation vertically, and not just this frame, but the entire animation, of course. And now that I have that, I can apply the fog. Now the fog filter is one of those photographic categories. Where is it? Come on, come out of hiding. Photographic, there it is. There's light diffusion. That's another one you could also add. And again, with a selection mask, possibly to apply it only in some areas. But there's the fog filter, and the fog filter and the sunset filter. Both of these merit your attention and your time here. Day for night also will add a beautiful feeling to that snowstorm after the day, like between daylight and the night starting. But the fog filter is the one I did in this case, and it applies this fog just towards the bottom. Right? So if you apply that, look what happens down here at the bottom. It just added a little bit of that foggy look, a little bit glary look, like a haze from the sky. And you can, again, you can apply that several times. Now that's one way to get this there. And another way is to actually go to the filter, where you have the same or similar collection of filters for individual images, but many of them also can be applied over the entire animation. The difference being here, you could actually change the parameters if there are any. It just so happens that in this particular filter there are no parameters, but as you know, with the timeline you can apply and keyframe those parameters if there are any. And more importantly, you can also click the undo. That's a very convenient thing. But you can also do that here. If you go and use the filters, the fog filter here, the nice thing about this one is that it also gives you a little bit more options to give it a slightly different tint, right? The coloring of the fog. So let's say we want to give it this one and a little bit more or less opacity. And not applying it just to this one image, but to the whole thing. If you click animate, you can apply it to the entire image sequence that way. Now you cannot keyframe it, but if you still have the timeline open here and you don't like this effect, you can just click undo and it will restore the most recently rendered one that was done under this one, under the timeline. So that's a quick way to restore that. And of course, also every once in a while, save this out to the disk as a DWA or an AVI file or an image sequence, and also store it, and you can click here to restore it quickly. So I'm going to do now this final fog, photographic fog. And this time I'm going to give it a little bit a different tint, kind of more of a reddish sunset look, and something like that. Animate that, and then I'm going to flip it back upside down, right? And that's right here. Flip vertically, the entire animation, and the way back to the normal orientation. And now at this point, because I gave it this reddish tint, I might also want to change the appearance of the lens flare, and perhaps actually render another lens flare on top of that. So I could see possibly doing that with something like this here, adding a reddish looking lens flare, perhaps somewhere up here. I don't know, I can't see it here in this preview too well, but that will be probably good enough. Maybe I want to make it stronger in appearance, and there you go. So now I'm getting to yet another appearance, and that's really the thing about this. You get so many combinations of filters and so many techniques to put it all together. And yeah, this sun is definitely a little bit too low. Let's undo that and move it up a little bit higher, something like this. Apply it there. And I think that may be just our final render, and there you go. So now I might want to perhaps crop to a portion of that. I might say go to filter, crop tool, and not filter, image, and say put it up there. Maybe I needed more of a wide angle appearance, something like this. Right, a little bit more narrow there. Right click that, crop, and there we go. Almost done, and thanks for watching.